Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, college football recruiting is my absolute favorite because it is just complete, utter nonsense all the time with completely bizarre, unexpected, irrational decisions being made. Tony, do you know where the number one player in the entire class of 2022 just signed?
Somewhere down south.
Yes, as one would expect. Yes.
But explain more, Tom.
So his name is Travis Hunter. He is a cornerback. And he was committed to, I believe, Florida State, if not widely expected to attend Florida State, and held a press conference in his high school and had three hats on the table. It might have been Auburn, Georgia, and Florida State, but whatever the first one was, he put it on his head and said, nah, and tossed it to the side. And they took the other two and kind of picked them both up and then put them back down and really messing around with the hat science thing. I didn't appreciate that part of it. The rest of it was great. Put one of them on his head, the Georgia hat, toss that to the side. Put the Florida State hat on his head. There's some polite applause. Then he tossed that to the side and asked his mom to toss him a hat. And he put that hat on and unzipped his jacket and revealed the t-shirt. Tony, the hat and t-shirt were for Jackson State. Jacksonville State, you might ask, the team that beat Florida State this year? No, not that one. Jackson State University, HBCU school in Jackson, Mississippi, coached by one Deion Sanders. Tony, the number one player in the nation, is going to Jackson State. I don't even, I mean, first of all, the video was awesome. Like, it was fantastic. And like, boy, there's all sorts of conversations about NIL and how this is going to change the sport. Got to say, didn't see this one coming.
No, and I've seen a couple of people on Twitter doing victory laps saying, haha, a small school just landed the number one player. And it shows you that the NIL has made it even for everybody. And yet you still look at like the top 10 recruiting classes and it's all the same schools. Like,
it is. Yeah, it is all the same schools. I was looking at this and going, and started working my way through the process of, okay, so Deion Sanders is angling for the Florida State job and has told Travis Hunter that, he can come to Jackson State, and then when Deion Sanders gets the Florida State job, they can just transfer to Florida State together and live happily ever after. And he'll get coached by Coach Prime for the first few years of his career, and it'll be fine, and he'll be the big man on campus, and yada, yada, yada. And then as I was thinking that through, our good buddy Bill Bender of the Sporting News wrote an article basically along the same lines. I went, good, yep. And as I was reading Bill's article, you want to know who got a contract extension literally on Wednesday? Literally the day that all of this happened. You want to know who got a contract extension, Tony? Florida State head football coach Mike Norvell, who just went 5-7 and just lost his top recruit to literally an FCS school, and whose big wins this year were a 3-point win over Syracuse, a 10-point win over North Carolina, beating UMass. Congratulations. 3 points over Miami and 3 points over Boston College. He had 2 wins by more than 3 points. One was against UMass. One was against North Carolina. Tony, I know Florida State fans love it when we're talking about the Noles, and they love it when everyone's talking about the Noles. I don't think they're going to want anyone talking about the Noles today.
This is very extending John Cooperish prior to the Michigan game type of vibes here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure things will be fine at Florida State. You can't keep losing there forever. And I'm sure Mike Norvell is the guy to change that. And as we talked about before the show, sometimes the devil is the guy to you ride with for a little while. And as you said, how many coaches can you pay at one time?
Exactly. Yeah, they're still paying Willie Taggart, I think, and then Willie left. Right before Willie left was Jimbo. They're not paying Jimbo anymore. That's good, but Mike Norvell has been there longer than Willie Taggart. Now has a worse record than Willie Taggart, and Willie Taggart got fired, and Mike Norvell got a contract extension. What a time to be alive!
Yeah, more than corners, though. I think Florida State needs like actual competent quarterback and also everything else.
An offensive line would help. A good offensive line. No, literally any offensive line would help at this point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Doesn't even have to be good. It can be bad. Mm-hmm. Just get one. Just get something and have them stay in a line. And maybe that will help. Mm-hmm. So Ryan Day spoke with reporters today about the the signing class that he had today. Says there still might be a couple of guys later in the week or in a couple of weeks, but he does also expect the numbers to go into the 20s and maybe probably low 20s at this point. But the numbers, trying to figure out the numbers. I've had people say, "Hey, where's Ohio State on 85?" And it's like I don't even consider that a real number anymore. Like there's no 85 is it doesn't it still exists, but it doesn't really because of all of the super seniors, the transfer portal, all of this. And I thought it was interesting. Day was asked, "Hey, do you save spots for the transfer portal?" It's like you don't even worry about it anymore. You don't even worry about saving numbers because players leave regardless. And so you just expect it to happen. So yeah, like you may have saved, like Urban Meyer used to save one for like a late blooming Ohio kid or whatever. At this point, you don't even save spots anymore because you know you're not going to be at 85. You're going to be at like 81 by the time spring camp even starts. So there's no concern about, oh no, we're at 88. What are we going to do? It's like you're at 88, but when you play your first game, you're going to be at 78 unless you bring in guys through the portal. It's crazy.
Yeah, the old scholarship math no longer applies because nothing matters. I mean, Dave talked about the fact that in high school who you have. In the pros, like you have a contract, so you're going to play. In college right now, it's just like everyone's a free agent if they say they're a free agent and can become a free agent at any time. Earlier this fall, we saw an Ohio State player become a free agent in the middle of a game. Like literally anything is possible at this point. So, I mean, I'm sure they're going to try not to be at 97 on August 10th or something like that. But yeah, I mean, if you're at 88, now, sure. I mean, whatever. Like you can't plan on if you plan on being on 85. To your point, if you plan on being at 85, you're actually going to be at 82 or 81 or 80, 78. I can't even imagine trying to figure out the math on this because we used to put together the scholarship chart and it was pretty straightforward. I was like, okay, here's the seniors, here's the juniors. Between the transfer portal stuff and super seniors and who still counts and who doesn't count anymore, and does your extra COVID year still count? Does that count 3 years from now if you had an extra COVID year and it's almost impossible to keep track of. And with as fast as stuff is changing, like I don't think you can get too hung up on, Ohio State is 2 over on April 20th this year. Like everyone's going to be 2 over or 15 under, and it's just like that's just kind of how it is from now on, probably until stuff sort of settles down.
Yeah, and who knows when it will. I mean, it will eventually, but and that was another thing that Day was asked. He was asked, do you still like the early signing day? Should you get rid of it? And you would think that if you could start getting stuff back to the way it was, because the early signing day has created a lot of chaos with the coaching's carousel and all of this, is like, you know what, just leave it. There's so many changes right now. Let's just leave stuff the way it is for a little while and let stuff settle because of all of these unintended consequences that every change makes. At least now they're aware of these unintended consequences of this change. You go back and now you eliminate this again, and now you're going to create some more changes. This whole butterfly effect of who knows what. And at least the less you change right now, the sooner everything settles down. And I think really that's the major goal for Day and other head coaches in his position, because there's just, as he said a few weeks ago, it's like being inside of a tornado. And maybe not the best analogy right now, but there's just a lot going on and it's a lot to handle. And let's just let everything ride, and maybe will eventually calm down, and then you go from there. But right now, there's been this groundswell for getting rid of it. He would vote to keep it. I'm interested to see where it goes, though.
Well, and I've kind of heard that they're looking at maybe pushing early signing day back to January, where at that point, how early is it? You're done a couple weeks early, so okay, congratulations, you're signed a month earlier than you would have been otherwise. But it's just it keeps changing the calendar for Ohio, for the college football world in terms of coach hirings, coach firings, all that kind of stuff. Right now, this whole class is signed, and they don't know what their defensive coaching staff is going to look like next year. Because that was something that Ryan Day was asked about on Wednesday. Like, okay, we know you're bringing in Jim Knowles. Is he going to be in? When are you going to start having this conversation with him about, what's coming next? And it was like, we'll worry about that on January 2nd. Right now, we're just worried about the Rose Bowl. Like, well, no, you just have this whole class of kids signed and they don't know who's going to be a coach on the defensive side of the ball, that's not like uniquely Ohio State thing. That's not Ohio State trying to be sneaky. That's just kind of how a lot of the coaching carousel is going right now. There's schools, I think, that are still open without a head coach, I believe, in FBS. It's crazy. And, I don't know if the answer is to move the early signing day up to August so that it's really an early signing day and it's done, or if the answer is to get rid of it entirely. But, at least, to Dave's point, if you keep it where it is, I don't think that where it is great, but if you keep it where it is, at least you're not going to make it worse, which, moving it up to August, like, sure, that might make it better, but it also you might have all sorts of unintended consequences there. So, with as much as is up in the air right now in college football, maybe one thing staying the same, at least for the short term, is not the worst thing in the world.
Mark Pantoni tweeted on Wednesday, spending signing day watching film of players in the transfer portal. Welcome to college football 2021. And that's what it is. They did say they have a couple of spots for transfer portal guys, in terms of targets, rather not spots, but targets. They're looking at some guys. The NIL stuff, Tom, to me was a very big topic, and we will eventually start talking about some of the players that Ohio State signed, but these overarching things about college football. One of the things that you see on Twitter and message boards is, Ohio State needs to be more proactive in NIL. And the thing that Ryan Day kept trying to explain to people today is Ohio State can't have anything to do with NIL. It's like, well, Texas is doing this. Texas is doing that. Oh, Texas A&M is doing this. Ole Miss is doing that, or whatever. It's not the schools per se. Now they may be back channeling it. It's alums. It's boosters that are doing this, and that's what it takes. And he's like, Ohio State, we're not going to get into that. One, it's unethical. It's up to people on the outside to do it. And that was another issue he had, where it's like, you're leaving it up into the hands of people on the outside, and you hope that they have the best intentions. You hope that they're doing things properly, but because you can't control it, you can't contain it. You don't know if they are. And so I know Texas coming in and getting Terrence Brooks has Buckeye fans up in arms. I understand that, but that stuff has happened before NIL, and it will continue to happen. Now, this is something I tweeted, Tom, regarding the NIL and Texas and stuff, and let me know what you think. I said, I see a lot of consternation about Texas football from Buckeye fans. The key is to have an alumni base that is so tired of losing that they will put forward NIL money to lure in recruits. But first, you have to go through some losing. Only a decade or so, small price to pay. Right now, Ohio State alums have been winning. There's nothing like, gosh darn it, we got to win. They have been. So there's no just decade-long thing of, we need Texas back, and we're going to get some people together, and we're going to put some money to get Texas back. Ohio State alums have money. I just don't know that they're as eager to spend it as Texas alums. And also, how much of these programs are imploring their alums to do it? Because it sounds like, according to Day, Ohio State's not going to be doing that.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like Ohio State's going to be quite as aggressive on this stuff as other schools are. And, there's been some takes this week on the NIL and unleashing the boosters. Here's one from Mike Farrell of Rifles, who has covered college football recruiting for a while, and you would think knows how the whole thing works. Okay, we have arrived at the point in college football where you can pay players to attend your school. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm making the Jim Halpert face into the camera. Like, come on, buddy, come on. Hey, first rodeo, is this? I mean, do you what? My favorite though. I'm going to pull up the Gene Chizik one right now.
Oh, geez.
It was that was my absolute favorite. I meant to pull it up before the show started. Every scholarship lineman at Texas will get $50,000 a year with new NIL deal, not to mention the $200,000 education. Americans struggling finding $50,000 jobs to feed their children. Next, it's $100,000 a player with no end in sight. Flawed system. Most money wins. # words of Chisholm. Tony, Gene Chizik coached at Iowa State. I remember that. Where did he go after Iowa State? I forget where he was coaching. Did he get somewhere in the South? Maybe. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, Tom. In fact, it was in the South. There's some sort of a church connection.
Mm-hmm. Was it Auburn? It feels
yes.
Yeah. I think he won a national championship there. Who was his quarterback when he was the coach at Auburn, Tony?
I believe it was Cameron Newton, former Florida Gator.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, Tony, as they say, it's an ongoing investigation. So, like, I don't know what to tell everyone. Like, what a shock. Gambling in this establishment. What? Gene Chizik, ladies and gentlemen, Gene Chizik is concerned that money, that the team with the most money might win.
I wonder what Barry Switzer thinks.
Certainly it would not impact some of our fine Southern religious-based institutions, for example, like Southern Methodist University, for example. I mean, certainly the negative impact of commerce, capitalism would not impact some of our finer, religious-based institutions in the college football realm. So anyway, so what we're talking about? I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I completely derailed us on how money was going to change college football. I don't know. Sorry, what? Yeah, no, this is one of these things where, I go back to one of my favorite tweets of all time. February 1st, 2013, 5:34 p.m. Tony, do you know which tweet I'm about to read?
Go ahead, Tom.
If you have facts about a violation, send it to compliance@olemiss.edu. If not, please do not slander these young men or insult their family. That is from at Coach Hugh Freeze. Tony, sometimes schools start recruiting really well out of nowhere. And then sometimes those coaches get fired later for reasons having to do with, sometimes you get fired because your results are too bad. Sometimes you get fired because your results are too good. We're still kind of in the wild, wild west stage of this. It does feel like it will settle down at some point. Mark Givler made a great point, which is, we are so early in this process that it's like, this is the point of the automobile laws where no one had seatbelts and drunk driving wasn't against the law. Like, this will ultimately get solved. All of this is a direct result of the NCAA just completely abdicating all of its responsibilities for decades and spending decades and decades fighting against any possibility of what was absolutely, obviously, screamingly obviously inevitable to everyone else watching, which was, this is going to happen at some point. So all you have to do is show just a tiny modicum of leadership and get ahead of it. But that was too much. That was altogether too much to ask. And so then they completely abdicated their responsibility. And then, like, 3 days before a state law was supposed to go into effect, allowing this, it was, oh, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. I don't. What are we supposed to do? Someone made a law. Like, go back in time 15 years, smack yourself on the back of the head and say, fix this, you moron. But they didn't do that. Time travel does not exist. So here we are. And there's we're kind of in the weird lawless start of this, and it'll eventually sort itself out.
I believe maybe Abe Simpson said it best when he said, I was for it before I was again it. Kind of the Jim Delaney playoff thing as well. Mm-hmm. You drag your feet until it's time that you can't drag it anymore, and that's where it's going. So you hop on board, and but it's all new. It's all wild. Eventually law will come to Deadwood and things will calm down. Until then, you might lose a Texan to Texas. Oh no. Like, that's kind of what Texas does. They recruit in-state guys, and they can take them from you as well. And I understand you're paying $50,000 to these 16 offensive linemen at Texas. They're going to transfer. They're going to leave. You're going to have another shot at them if you want. I mean, somebody's going to need playing time. So these guys, it's not like only Ohio State players transfer. Let's keep that in mind. It's not the Buckeyes that have produced 8,000 players into the portal right now. It's all of these schools, and it's schools like Ohio State as well. And then you can also go shopping there also. Tom, let's talk about some of these players. Well, first let's talk about Jim Knowles, because he was a topic. He will stop by, I guess, this week or next, and then him and Dale talk. But they said it wouldn't be fair to anybody to have him at practice or anything like that. And I think what I've been saying, what you've been saying is, he's probably going to be watching a lot of film, but there's no reason for him to be involved in any game planning, any coaching. These aren't his players. This is not, it's not his system. They don't know him. There's confusing things going. It can confuse people. Like, for instance, my mom's church, the pastor of like the last 40 years, finally retired. And he still, I guess, lives, in town or whatever, but doesn't go to the church anymore because it's confusing for the parishioners. So it's like, you can't have the new pastor and the old pastor there together, because the new pastor, they'll never really kind of glom onto him. Same with the defensive coordinators, basically. And so you got to know who to turn to. Day was asked if, have you told your staff members who aren't going to be here, who's not going to be here, because somebody will have to go or at least be demoted. And said, yeah, they have those conversations every day. They talk about that. Tom, did he actually answer the question? Like, yes, it sounded to me like the people who won't be here know they won't be here. Is that what you got from that?
Yeah, I don't know that I took that away. I think this was one of these Ryan Day improvisational jazz press conferences where you have to listen to the notes he's not playing sometimes. There were a couple notes that he didn't play today that was like, that's an interesting thing not to have answered when you were asked directly about it. Yeah, I get the sense that there are going to be coaches who do not necessarily know until it was a little contradictory. Let's put it that way, where he was going to talk to Jim Knowles about things after January 2nd, but then also like he was asked about, have you talked to guys? Like, oh, we have conversations every day. It's like, well, conversations about what? Because I feel like the answer is no. The coaches do not necessarily know if they're not coming back. And he was asked about some specific coaches, and it was like the answer was not he got asked one question and he answered another one, and it was like, well, that was an answer. I don't know if it was the answer, but it was an answer. And is that because he doesn't want to specifically say, yes, this guy is coming back, and then when he gets asked about someone else, and he doesn't answer, does that mean that, well, he was asked about Larry Johnson and he answered a question about Larry Johnson. It wasn't that question, is Larry Johnson coming back? So you can go ahead and put on your, detective hat and figure out if you want to think that means Larry Johnson is not coming back, or if that means that Ryan Day is just, if he answers a question that, yes, Larry Johnson is coming back, and then he's asked about Kerry Combs and he does not answer that Kerry Combs is coming back, well, then what does that mean about Kerry Combs? Obviously, that's, by not answering, he has answered. So, maybe he was just being, just the decision has been made and he doesn't want to answer a question directly. And maybe that means more than we think it does. He was asked the same question asked a question as well about the Heisman Trophy ceremony. And, do you feel there was anything that was maybe inappropriate at the Heisman Trophy ceremony? The, not very subtle subtext of that question is, Desmond Howard, that was kind of a stupid thing to say right in front of CJ Stroud. And when CJ Stroud couldn't defend his teammates, and boy, he's kind of a jerk, huh? And Day just talked about the honor of the Heisman Trophy. And, so sometimes when you don't answer a question, it's because you don't want to answer the question. And sometimes it's because you can't, or because, whatever. But yeah, there were a couple like, that was an interesting not answer to that question.
The Heisman thing, he kept saying that, he respects the award. He has the utmost respect for the award. To me, saying but not saying, somebody should have had more respect for the award in Desmond Howard, who won it. But certainly choosing to not want to continue on any bulletin board stuff, or just time to move on and we'll keep it in house. The Larry Johnson question. And so I have my Otter transcription. It's an automated transcription and it's not 100%. It's automated, like I said. And so the question was, is basically, is Larry Johnson coming back? And can you address that? And I'm just going to read the answer here as it's provided on my phone. And if I say a word that I shouldn't, that's not me. That's just a bad transcription. But here's the answer to: is Larry Johnson coming back? Is he going to retire or whatever? It's like, and here's the response: Yeah, I mean, every year, like you said, there's always going to be stuff. If we do well, then the opportunities are going to be all over the place for our guys. If we don't do well, there's going to be, situations where guys, are concerned with losing their jobs. It's just kind of the way of the world. Not that I agree with it, but that's just the way it is. And so this year is unlike any other year. There'll be things that come up and we'll just try to adapt with them as we go. But right now, I know our whole staff is just focused on this Rose Bowl. So is that a yes? Is that a no? I will say, however, he did talk about Caden Curry being coached by Larry Johnson. So that was another way I was trying to piece stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, and he mentioned Kevin Wilson as well with Bennett Christian. So that's two guys. But, and maybe you're right. Maybe it's like a process of elimination. I'll ask him about Larry Johnson. You ask him about Al Washington. Mm-hmm. And the one guy he says he doesn't want to, answer, then we'll know that he's out of here. But Day is a professional. He was very Jim Tressel-ian in this one in terms of, because that Larry Johnson question was not, I mean, there was nothing about, he did not respond to, there's no mention of Larry Johnson in the answer. It was just, now I will read a random page from my book.
Yeah. What's it called when senators get up and
filibuster?
Filibuster. Yes. Yeah. Just an absolute just running out the clock. I just want to share something that just came across my timeline literally less than a minute ago. This is the first tweet is from Philadelphia Inquirer Sports. Sources: Texas assistant Stan Drayton in advanced negotiations with Temple to be its next football coach. Quote tweeted by
Mike Weber.
Mike Weber. Congratulations! Crying, laughing emoji. I mean, that's how you Twitter, man. Like,
that's good.
Stan Drayton taking another job hours after a signing day of some sort.
That's
how you do it, man. Fantastic.
That's college football. I mean, that's recruiting. That's quite the nutshell right there. And for Mike Weber to be able to just have fun with it as he did. Speaking of Mike Weber, let's talk about Dallin Hayden, because I thought Ryan Day really had some good things to say about Ohio State's lone running back in this class, basically saying comes from a football family. He's football smart. He understands the game. His dad, Aaron Hayden, former Tennessee running back, likes Dallin Hayden's toughness, and they watched him quite a bit this year and were just really impressed with him. And, this is a running back room, Tom, that you think is going to be okay, but, we've seen stranger things happen, and with injury histories and who knows what else. At this point, you can't put anybody beyond having some drama next year. But Day, I thought, just watching him talk about Dallin Hayden, he seemed to really, really like him.
Yeah, he is. He for them to only take one running back this class, they took two last year, and looking at 1 to 2 next year, it feels like they're in decent shape with Richard Young out of Florida for next year. Could they take a second guy? Maybe. But, this was a year where they were going to take one guy, and you got to, if you're going to take one guy, you really got to hit him, because there's no guarantee that your two guys from last year are going to stick around forever. And there's no guarantee that guys who are older, who might not be, might be behind people on the depth chart, there's no guarantee that those guys stick around together. That is the nature of college football right now. So you have to make sure you really nail the next one, because sure, right now they have 4 running backs, scholarship running backs on their roster. There's no guarantee that they have more than 2, or, they theoretically could have 1 by spring ball, so you really have to have, make sure you hit your next, you hit that next class if you're only going to take one guy. And it feels like they were very happy with Hayden, that he gives them what they need. He was effusive in his praise of Dallin Hayden. And, you're never going to get a guy who, the coach kind of goes, well, we needed, he fit the suit, basically is Johnny Bravo, like, well, we needed a guy, and he's, he's about the right size and shape. So we just picked, like, that's not how coaches talk about guys in early signing day, but there are guys that they're more excited about than others. He sounded like he was really excited about Dallin Hayden. And, that's a pretty good, that's a pretty good sign. And he fits kind of the mold of what they're looking for. I mean, they talk a lot about family. They talk a lot about, versatility and work ethic and all that kind of stuff. Like that's all the stuff that they really value in that room and in that program. So that's probably a good sign for him.
Yeah, a lot of times you have to watch how the coaches say it on signing day, as much as or more than what they're saying. It's how they're saying and say it and how they just brighten up. And another guy that kind of got similar responses was Sonny Styles. Day was asked, so where are you going to play him? And Day said, everywhere. They plan to use him everywhere. He's like, quote was, he's like a Swiss Army knife out there. That's something that we have obviously talked about on this show. Like he has no set position, so use him that way. And he's talking about, getting after the quarterback, dropping into coverage, can play man, can play zone, can do this, can do that. It will be interesting when we finally do get to talk to Jim Knowles to ask him about, when you're going through this recruiting class and you see somebody like Sonny Styles, what goes through your mind? Because you're projecting, how can I use this guy? What do you see? And maybe we'll get an idea of what the future holds for him. And of course, Sonny Styles was originally a 2023 kid. And Day said that when he committed, that he told Day and his family told Day that they were thinking about reclassifying to 2022. Now we know that has not worked out well for Ohio State to this point. They're currently 0 for 1 doing that with Quinn Ewers, but this is a very different situation and certainly something they were totally on board with. And it was not Ohio State's idea. It was Styles. And as the family told Day, Sonny has always just played up to the level of his competition. He's got an older brother. I did the same thing when I was like, my brother's 5 years older than me. When we grew up playing baseball, I would play with his friends and it gets you better. And this is something that Sonny has done, playing with his brother and their friends and playing upgrades. And I think he's been starting since he was a freshman. So, and has certainly been more than capable. So this is the next step in that. And I know I've been saying I don't expect much from him this year or in 2022. I don't know that I disagree with myself at this point, but clearly another guy that projects well, as we will discuss in our kind of a projection podcast we do for Friday on the signing class.
Yeah, we'll get to that Friday. Settle down. We'll get there. But yeah, he's someone who I think is, I think the long-term ceiling there is so high, but the short term, like you gotta keep in mind, he's coming in a year early. He's a year young. He is, I think he's mentally ready. Is he physically ready? He may be. He's, his dad was a Buckeye, was an NFL player. He was in a big, good Central Ohio high school football program. So he's going to be as prepared as anyone, I think, coming into college as you can be. But, there's still going to be a lot of growing, and there's still going to be, the Ohio State. Like I know Pickerington has some very good football programs, but I'm guessing their stuff is going to not necessarily be quite as complicated as what Ohio State runs. So you're going to have to learn, everyone's going to have to learn an entirely new defense and all that kind of stuff. So, you have to kind of be patient there. But yeah, I think the ceiling on Sonny Styles, on CJ Hicks is incredibly high. And there will be opportunities for those guys to play potentially this fall if they're ready, both physically and mentally. There are spots available potentially on the field because linebacker, assuming they're both in somewhere in that linebacker-ish mix, those are spots where you could have opportunities to play because there's not a ton of depth there right now, especially returning veteran depth. So, we'll see. But, as with everything, like be patient. Not everyone is going to be Denzel Burke. Not everyone is going to be Travion Henderson. Yes, those guys did it last year. That is not the norm. That is not what you should expect coming in. So just kind of be patient. If if these guys are not playing a whole heck of a lot by mid-October, like don't get on Twitter and call them busts and, just patience. It'll be okay. This is there's going to be a learning curve for both those guys.
He was asked if they were like kind of fell short in certain position groups. And he said, no, he didn't think so. And there's still obviously time that they're targeting other guys. I want to talk about corners because they did lose out on Terrence Brooks, who decommitted and ended up at Texas. And also Jaheim Singletary is another guy that decommitted way back when. He said that they want 8 corners in the room. They currently have 8 scholarship corners However, two of those are Cam Brown and Seven Banks. So, and he did say they hit a home run with their corners last year with Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock and J.K. Johnson. The year before was, Legend Cavazos and Ryan Watts, and the jury is very much out on that group. And so there's this, Ryan Turner. I think they're looking at Kai Stokes as a safety because he's not in that number that I can tell. And Jair Brown. So they've got the numbers that they want, but they may not be there for long. And that's when Day said, well, they can still, if they lose somebody, they'll either recruit another guy or look to the portal because it's important for them to have that 8. And if they don't, then do you move an Andre Turrentine? Do you move a Kai Stokes? I do know, Tom, that they won't have to move any linebackers to corner like Jim Tressel did 21 years ago.
Yeah, 2001. C. Grant went from linebacker to corner, and that was like, oh boy, no, that's not a good sign. There are certain moves that you can make. Generally, if you're moving a corner to safety, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're moving a safety to corner, that's not always a good sign. If you're moving a linebacker to corner, that's extremely not a good sign. But they have some depth there. This is not. I saw a bunch of hyperbole on the board on Tuesday night and Wednesday as the Brooks news kind of started to trickle out. And this is the worst that this corner room has ever been. This is this is the least depth they've ever had at corner. It's like literally last year, literally 1 year ago, the depth in the corner room was worse than this. So it's not great. You don't want to miss, but it's not the end of the world. You have, this is the third time in 4 years that they've had a corner flip on early signing day. Like that's not a great trend, but it's not the end of the world. There are other options. And this is much less of an issue than it would have been 3 years ago, because you have so many more opportunities to bring guys in now, whether through the February signing period, whether through the transfer portal. Like there are other options available. And Ohio State, if there's not a ton of depth at a position and there's an opportunity to get on the field relatively early, that's a pretty attractive option for players. So you would think that they would be able to potentially, add someone one way or the other if they feel they are still kind of shorthanded there.
Day was asked if losing Terrence Brooks was a surprise, and he said it was very disappointing. They had no conversations leading up to that was going to happen. I assume in the last few days they kind of read the writing on the wall and that was going to happen because everybody else had as well. And it's or at least in the last day or so. And certainly Wednesday morning, there were some offensive line discussion. He was asked, are you kind of want to take a developmental offensive lineman every year just in case and see how it goes, but are you taking too many? And the answer I think was, I don't know. And that's they said, we'll know in a year or so. And that's, I think every year when you've taken somebody you shouldn't have, obviously. But it sometimes takes you 2 or 3 years to learn about specific guys. And you've invested so much. It's not wasting time, but that's time that could have been spent elsewhere. But it's a difficult thing. And we've talked about this in previous shows, the offensive line, to spend so much time trying to get somebody to a point that eventually you're just going to have to be like, they're never going to get it. And so you have to move on, leave them in the wake and send them to the portal, let them know that, hey, you might want to go to the portal, to which, use your ability to move on and find a new spot and be your own person, be your own boss, go find a new job somewhere else. And this offensive line class has some question marks, missed on some guys, obviously. And by the time you find out you've stretched on so many guys, it's too late. But there is still the portal.
Right. And that's the tricky thing about offensive line, is that you have these guys who it takes, like, that's a position where it takes so long for guys to develop that, there are spots where you could bring a guy in and it's just like, oh, this is immediately not, like, this is not going to happen. you're not expected as an offensive lineman to come in and just immediately be an impact player at the college level. That's just not ever how it works unless you're literally Orlando Pace. That's, literally Orlando Pace is one thing. And then everyone else is just, you go from, there are guys who started, oh goodness, I'm blanking on the name now. Like 2016 offensive lineman started day one.
Michael
Jordan. Yes. It's funny. I was thinking Michael Jordan. I'm like, no, he played basketball and a little bit of baseball. I must be remembering the wrong name. It was something Jordan. Jim Jordan? No. Okay. I got there eventually. Jordan?
Wrestler.
No. Yes. Yes. Michael. So Michael Jordan. Yes. So you have these very rare exceptions, but other than that, you're not going to come in and play as a true freshman as offensive lineman because it takes a couple of years to, refine the technique, get bigger, get stronger. So you can take these guys, but you're not going to know for a fact for a couple of years whether the project you took was, well, this is a bad gamble, or, Michigan State has taken projects for years and they, have made a very, very good offensive line system out of them. So there is this long delay. The good news is, that means that, and offensive linemen are very hard to evaluate just as a position group. That is a very difficult group to evaluate positionally. The good news is, sometimes you'll have an offensive lineman who's very good who ends up at a place like Florida International because offensive line is a very difficult place to evaluate. And once that guy is at Florida International for a year and Butch Davis retires / is fired / talks about the fact that they have no resources there at all, and that guy's like, hey, I'm going to go somewhere better than Florida International, which is like 125 of the 130 FBS programs, he has that opportunity. And then you can go in the portal and get that guy if you want to. You are not the only person going after him, but that is an opportunity to go, do the Jonah Jackson thing, to restock the offensive line with someone who's kind of, off the shelf ready for you. So, it is the difficult part of offensive line recruiting and evaluation is you're not going to know for a couple of years. And it's not because, it's not because, anything with these specific guys. It's just that position in general is just so difficult to evaluate. It takes so long to develop that you got this real delayed reaction to every recruiting class. So, it's like evaluating a coaching hire. Is this a good hire? Is this a good offensive line recruiting class? Like, I don't know, ask again in 3 years.
Yeah. And even like 5-star guys like Demetrius Knox and Nicholas Petit-Frere still take time.
Mm-hmm.
And Demetrius Knox was never really lived up to his billing. And it's even the guys you think are going to be great, or you could have defensive tackle Billy Price come in and be a Remington Award winning center, or but at least they've not gotten to the point of the Darryl Baldwin, Chase Ferris situation,
mm-hmm.
where they had to bring over a defensive end to be a left tackle or a right tackle rather. So they are still ahead of the game there. Tom, anything else before we go that you wanted to touch on?
Scrolling through my notes from the press conference.
Jay likes Caden Curry. Let's go ahead and
yeah.
mention that.
Mm-hmm.
Very excited by him. Has toughness and an edge, which is a must. He says he has it. Tremendous twitch and a motor. The motor is his best characteristic. Great family. This is a guy that I talked with his mom and dad and Caden Curry last year when I went to see them, and they seemed all on board. And Caden Curry told Day as much like a couple days ago or whatever. And Day was like, why couldn't you just let us know that earlier? So this is a guy that I think everybody had pointed towards Ohio State, and yet Ohio State had to keep working. And they did. It was an interesting conversation that Day also shared with the NFL guy at Caden Curry's game.
Yeah, there was a NFL scout who was watching Caden Curry film or watching him in person or something. He texted, he was like, "Who is Caden Curry?" Like, just jumps off the film at you, jumps off the field at you. I think that's basically. I think I said essentially the same thing when we were talking about him earlier in the week. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you look at the game and it's like, well, which one of these guys is the D1 guy? Caden Curry was never one. It was just like, yep, okay. Am I watching Caden Curry's game, highlight film, or am I just watching Caden Curry's game film? Spoiler alert, it's just the same thing. Like, sometimes you can watch a drive or two and it's like, I don't know which one of these guys is supposed to be the incredibly good one. You never had that problem with Caden Curry. So yeah, I was not all that surprised to hear that evaluation. Also on the defensive line, officially, they only have 2 defensive linemen signed right now. They have Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry. Others guys are announcing in January. Hero Canoe, Amari Abor. Those are people, if you've listened to the Morning Scoop this week, you've heard us talk about them. Mark Givler, I checked with Mark Givler on Wednesday's Morning Scoop. He said his understanding was those guys were going to sign, but then just announce in January, at least one, probably both of them, and sign on Wednesday and then announce in January. Dave was asked about his defensive line recruiting in general and said, there's a couple other guys out there that we feel pretty good about, which, coaches can't, if hypothetically, if those guys had signed and we're going to just announce in January, that's a lot like what that would sound like, because he doesn't want to spoil the surprise, but he wants to kind of let normally we would be freaking out if we only had two guys in the class. So the fact that we're not freaking out, you should, you could read into that whatever you'd like to read into that, I think is my takeaway there. Again, this is a lot like he's not answering questions earlier. Like, how does he answer the question, to your point? How does he answer the question about an individual player? Well, how does he answer the question about an individual position group? That's going to tell you kind of where things might be headed with those guys as well.
Tom, I feel like I don't have a title for the show. It should be something like which signee is Ryan Day most excited about, or something like that. Do we need to answer that if we actually use the title?
I feel like you just put Deion Sanders and Travis Hunter. What does the Deion Sanders, Travis Hunter recruitment or signing day shocker mean for Ohio State? And you can,
what can Ryan Day learn from Deion Sanders?
Oh man, I don't know. He might be able to learn a little bit about that drip, like those Aflac commercials. Man, he needs one of those teal jackets, turquoise jackets, whatever color those are in that Aflac commercial. He needs one of those Nick Saban jackets, is what I'm thinking.
Those are actually red jackets. Are you colorblind?
Maybe that if those are in fact red jackets, then yes, I am.
I'm going to see somebody about that. All right, then that will do it for this episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in. It's been a busy week. It's been an exciting week. It's not the end of the world. A couple of guys got away. Buckeyes signed a lot more that will be future stars down the road. So watch out for that. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we will talk to you guys later.